We've had a few things happen within the last month with the organization, so I want to give a quick update. I'm also going to do just like a quick intro to SPARSA for those that are new here. Give an update on financials and our first stretch goal to work on our first grant program, the Student Hacker Fund. And then I'll introduce Mariah for our first talk tonight. And then we have one panel led by Rusty. And it's going to be a really, really great night. So super excited to be here. So really when we first started thinking of building out this organization as a nonprofit, a lot of us have benefited from having a cybersecurity club that we went to while we were in college. And so we wanted to kind of recreate that security club experience away from college. It's kind of morphed into something more where we really just want that community, whether you're in college, out of college, never went to college, you're transitioning to InfoSec, or maybe you're thinking about getting into it and things like that. So doesn't matter if you're a professional or getting started, this is a place that you can be, just kind of present and exploring different topics and things like that. And also really join in on some of the activities that we're doing, like our presentations tonight. So really our mission statement, we want to provide training and education around cybersecurity topics for the community, create opportunities for networking events like the one that we're having tonight. And then hopefully we can start doing some more networking events when COVID lifts up at different security conferences and things like that. And also to promote independent security research. We think it's really important that people that are in cybersecurity don't need to have a full-time job doing it. That a lot of us kind of do this outside our job. And we kind of got into it like that. And so to provide some logistics and some support for those that want to explore different topics is going to be a really big thing here. And we'll get into that with our Student Hacker Fund right after this. So in order to kind of make this a reality, we built a 501c3, so registered with the IRS, where people can make donations. And we want to fundraise from those donations. And we want to start putting these into really awesome programs. So last month, we talked about our membership structure, our mailing lists. We want to do a lot of networking events, and right now we're being nimble and trying to do as much as we can on Twitch because we've traditionally done things at events and conferences. And to do this, we need your help. And even $1 goes a really long way to kind of fund these programs and things like that. So I'm going to link over I'm going to link over at the end of this slide to where you can go and donate. But anything that you can help us out with, one of the goals that we have here as well is to be super, super transparent and show you where the funds are going. And so with that being said, we wanted to provide a quick financials update. So we had 14 donors since our last Twitch stream, which is super awesome. Thank you everybody who's donated. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's $1 or $10, and we've also had a few $100 plus donations as well. It goes a really long way. It's a lot of money, and we really appreciate that. So as of right now, we have about $968 cash on hand. We're spending a little bit of that to do things like Facebook ads for this Twitch event, but really our stretch goal is to get to the $2,500 mark. And I talked about this a little bit at our last stream. We're starting something called the Student Hacker Fund. And the basic premise behind the Student Hacker Fund, or the Student Hacker, is that if you or anybody that you know has an idea in cybersecurity that they want to perform research on, we want to provide material support for you to go and chase that. Whether it's doing something with web security or whether it's doing something with Linux security, anything that you think would contribute to the research community, we'll provide funding for equipment. We'll provide licenses for project management software like Jira and Confluence and things like that, so you can have your own wiki page, a private GitHub, and you just have everybody who's part of SPARSA at your disposal to go and kind of pitch ideas to and things like that. So we're still building out the grant now and the grant program, but we've ran some numbers, and the basic premise is that if we can get to about $2,500, it'll cover a lot of different things that we can do to make this really interesting for college students and high school students, as well as those that want to pursue this professionally as well. So if you do want to help get us to this first stretch goal, go to sparsa.org. There should be a donate button right at the top. and you can submit one-time PayPal donations. You can do recurring PayPal donations. And the awesome thing about all of this is that because we're a 501c3, you can donate, and then PayPal will give you a receipt. And with that receipt, you can actually have some tax benefits with it. You can claim some of that money back on your taxes. So you can put your money to good use instead of paying Uncle Sam, right? But SPARSA.org is our website. Hit that donate button at the top. And if you're interested on news and updates, we really rely heavily on making sure that we can provide as much information to all of those that participate as much as possible. So go to signup.sparsa.org, sign up for our mailing list. We'll be sending something out in the new year, and we're going to start doing recurring email blasts as well from there. So you'll get news about new grants, new programs, Twitch streams, even Twitch streams that are just kind of like out of the blue. We're going to be doing a lot of that as well. So please go and sign up. And that's my update for tonight. So I tried to buy a little bit of time here for our first presenter. We were just getting some logistical details in place to have her start her stream on us with Discord. But Rusty, can we bring Mariah in?
Yeah, let's take a quick break. We'll get Mariah set up here, and then we'll be good to go. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. See you guys in a moment.
Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome back, everyone. With me is Mariah Kenny, giving a presentation about what makes Meta CTF so meta. A story about 4 students building a cybersecurity company from the ground up and now running competitions and training globally, learning about cyber education, entrepreneurship, and what it's really like to start a company. So Mariah here is the co-founder of Meta CTF LLC and an incident response consultant at CrowdStrike, which I'm sure has been an exciting week. So with that, I will kick it over to you, Mariah. Take it away.
Thank you. All right. So like Rusty said, my name is Mariah Kenny, and that's my Twitter handle there. We're going to talk a little bit about Meta CTF today. And let's hope that this works. Okay, there we go. So quick agenda, just going to do a quick introduction for me, talk a little bit about our Meta CTF pitch and kind of the process that we went through, pitching to investors and a few other things like that. And then our origin story, how we got where we are today, and then a few lessons learned along the way, as well as our outlook, kind of what are we doing today and what are we looking to do tomorrow. So do a quick introduction. Again, my name is Mariah Kenny. I am a UVA engineering alumni, and I studied computer science. While I was there, I also was on our NCCDC team. I was actually one of the co-founders of our UVA CCDC team. And then while I was at UVA, I also co-founded Meta CTF, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And then I graduated from UVA in 2019, and now I work full-time as well for CrowdStrike as a consultant doing incident response and cloud security. Like Rusty said, it's been busy times. So let's go on to this. So when we started MetaCTF, incorporated into an actual company, a lot of what we were doing was actually our pitch. People say, hey, you're working on a company. What's your elevator pitch? Like, what is this about? Why should we care? And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through some of our old pitch slides of when we were actually pitching to investors and to different entrepreneurship competitions, just so you can get an idea of, what we do, why you should care, and all of that stuff. So this is our logo, MetaCTF. Our little tagline there is compete, hack, learn. And there might be a slight delay on the audio to video, so just let me know in the chat if there's any issues there. And so this is one of our slides from one of our pitch decks, is that cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world. This is actually a quote from somebody at IBM. This is from a few years ago, but obviously it's still true today. There's a lot of activity ongoing and changing every day. And part of the reason that the cybersecurity industry exists in the first place was for us to actually combat these, different cyber threats, to either investigate them, prevent them from happening in the first place, and everything in between there. But there's actually, a huge gap where companies either aren't able to find the talent they need, or if somebody's interested in getting into the industry in the first place, there's a huge education gap. And I know that's something that has been improved over the past few years. But, students that want to get into cybersecurity, or people that are working in other industries that want to move over cybersecurity, there can be a gap there. And so that's actually one of those gaps that we tried to fill. And so this is just a quick, picture of how we do that. Basically, we run different competitions and trainings that are hands-on, interactive, and learning-based. Basically help anybody, no matter where they are, kind of go up to that next level. So if you're coming in, you know nothing about cybersecurity, like that's fine. That's what we're here for, is to help, teach you those basics. And so you have a foundation to build on. Or if you already super knowledgeable about, say, like application security, but you want to learn more about forensics or something else, we'll help, get you to that next level and learn about some of those other things as well. So this is kind of how we go about it. Then these are just a few pictures from some of our in-person events back when we had in-person events, and hopefully we'll get back to those soon, but we also run some remotely as well, and obviously all of them remotely now. And this is just a few of the different ways that we do that. So we run CTF events. So CTF stands for Capture the Flag. They're basically cybersecurity competitions where we break down complex cybersecurity topics into simple challenges that are related to real world content. So, it's kind of a gamified way of learning about cybersecurity. We also do, different training stuff. And again, these are all slides from our pitch deck. I'm not trying to pitch you on our company, but just kind of give you a picture of, if you were an investor, this is how we're explaining what we do. And then we also do labs for schools, universities, basically anybody. If you want to learn about cybersecurity, we'll find a way to tailor that content for you and to help you learn. This was another cool slide from one of our pitch decks. And so when you're pitching at a competition or to investors, basically they want to know, why should we give you money? Why should we care in the first place? What if we give you a bunch of money and then tomorrow you're like, yep, we're closing down, like nobody's interested. And so this was the slide, this is actually from 2 years ago now, that we are kind of showing basically our progress over time. So you can see when we started in 2015 and we had run 2 events, and those are actually at a high school. And so then this was a slide from 2018, and we were projecting that we would hit 20 events in 2019. I think we actually passed that number in 2019. And then in 2020, I don't actually have an exact number, but I think that in 2019, we ran like 30 events in 2019, but a lot of them were 50 to like 100 people participating, either in students participating or people at companies. But this year, I think we had a few less events, but they were actually bigger. So I think we had a few events that were 500 to 600 people. And then our most recent event actually had over 2,000 people. And so we're kind of running fewer events per year, but reaching more people, which is actually pretty cool as well. So this is just a cool slide from one of our pitch decks. This is another one that, again, they're going to say, what makes you different than anybody else? And like, why should we care? And so this was us just kind of showing that there are other organizations that obviously do similar work, but we kind of are set apart from that because we're both making it affordable, but we're also making it more personalized. It actually took us a really long time to make this slide because one, we had to, research all of our competitors and figure out what was going on, and then figure out what we even wanted to put on these two axes. So it was actually just a good thought exercise in the first place, because when we were at, so when we started this company, we were all university students. And so we didn't necessarily have the same knowledge as somebody who's in the industry that was actually using these different organizations. So we did a lot of research on them. So it was a good exercise for us as well. Okay, and so then this slide is so we had an advisor who at every meeting was like, if you end a pitch deck with a thank you slide, you're kicked out of my class. Like, I never want to speak to you again. Because they basically said that the last slide of your pitch deck, when somebody was, let's say, like asking questions, that there shouldn't just be a thank you. It's basically a wasted opportunity if all you have up there is thank you, and they, like, the investors that are asking you these questions and staring at this slide that has like 2 useless words on it are basically useless. And so this is actually our end slide that we've used for our pitch decks over the years. So I just want to show you that as well. Okay, so going backwards a little bit, our origin story. So, how did we get here in the first place? This is our team. This is our core team, at least. There was 4 of us, and there's still 4 in our core team. So Roman and Jake actually started MetaCTF when they were in high school. It's a funny story, actually, because we all went to the same high school, but I didn't actually know them when I was at that high school. And we found out like 3 years down the road when we all ran into each other at UVA and started this company. So it's kind of funny there, but they basically started building out this CTF platform because they wanted to learn about cybersecurity, but there were no resources to do that. And so they actually, started this to help teach some of themselves and their peers about cybersecurity. And then we ran into each other at UVA and we were all interested in cybersecurity. And we actually started the 3 of us, so me, Jake, and then Roman, all were on the inaugural CCDC team for UVA. So that's how we kind of ran into each other. And then we brought Marina onto the team as well. So we have a good crew here. We actually have expanded. So Roman, we just hired on as our first full-time person. He's our CEO. So that's super exciting. And then the others of us are just founders. And we actually have a social media manager, which is pretty cool. And then we have like 10 to 15 challenge devs. So we kind of went from the 4 of us just like always working on this and handling everything. So now we have 15 to 20 people at any given day working on stuff. So it's actually pretty cool. Let's see what's here. Okay, so I just like this meme. So I just wanted to put on slides, but it's actually pretty accurate. You kind of build the stuff and you're like, all right, what am I going to do with this now? So kind of going back to some of the pitch deck stuff, I saw some of you guys talking about ISDS. I actually have a funny story about that because I think it was 2 years ago. We had a competition coming up in Charlottesville that we had to basically put in an application for. It was a entrepreneurship competition, but I realized when I got to ISDS that I hadn't finished putting together the video or the application. And so I actually had to sit there and finish putting together a pitch deck and record a video and put all the audio together. And so it was basically, sometimes running a startup is balancing a whole bunch of things all the time. All right. I don't know if it dropped and if you all can hear me now.
You're good. Continue on.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Okay, so let's just go on to the next one. All right. And so this isn't super related, but this is our platform, our CTF platforms, just in case you haven't seen it before. So this is how we run a lot of our competitions. And so you can see some of the different categories that we create content from. There's a few of them that aren't in here. So, binary exploitation, cryptography, forensics, lots of different stuff. So depending on what people are interested in, we'll kind of pull different content for different competitions to teach people about that. All right, so quick lessons learned, and then I'll wrap up. And then if there's any questions or anything like that. I've kind of kept it a little bit away from some of like the business stuff, but feel free to ask any questions about that too. Okay, so a huge part, honestly, of running a company is working with your team. I'm sure you all are working on different teams in your companies as well, but when you have a startup, you're not necessarily working on the startup 100%. Some people are, some people aren't. For us, when we first started, we were all university students. And so we had school, we had competitions, we had all this other stuff that we were figuring out. And then also running this company and having to travel to different places to run competitions and events, which was super fun, but could be super stressful sometimes. So these are just a few lessons learned. And I think this applies to basically everyone, everywhere, not just if you're starting a company, running a company, but just in general life. So one, working with your team, you need to know your team. You need to know each other's strengths and weaknesses and know what your priorities are and make sure that you're all on the same page. And then communicating. And honestly, teamwork, communication, no matter what job you're in, are the two of the most important skills. Even if I work for two different technical companies in technical positions, but teamwork and communication can make all the difference. So like when you're talking to people, so for example, for a startup, you need to know your audience. So if I'm talking to people that are participating in competition and they know nothing about cybersecurity, I need to know that, and I need to talk to them and basically help them build that foundation so that in the future, when they're working on cybersecurity things, they have that baseline to actually build on. If I'm pitching at an entrepreneurship competition and I know that the three investors that are sitting there in the judges' seats have only ever, invested in, say, like apparel companies or like medical organizations or something like that, then I know that I need to take a step back and say, hey, what is this cybersecurity thing anyways? And what are we talking about? Before we actually go into any of the work that we do, because otherwise they won't even understand. Okay. And then assumptions. So this still goes back to like, a few different things. So like if I'm running a competition, I'm not going to assume that anybody knows something or doesn't know something. I'm just going to ask, because if I just assume and I assume that they understand, let's say that there's a challenge where they have to like decode like base 64 or something like that. And if you are familiar with any sort of encoding, you'll be like, yeah, of course that's base 64. Like, don't you see like the equal signs or whatever? But if I just assume that they know and they ask me about it, I'm like, why don't you know this? One, it's rude. And two, it would just make them feel bad. And what if they never come back to cybersecurity because one person was mean to them? We obviously don't want that. And so instead, I might say, are you familiar with encoding? Or have you ever done cybersecurity before? Have you ever done computer science before? And if they say no, like I work in, the financial and like I work in some other, job, then I'm going to have to start from the beginning and say, okay, here are the basics. Here's why you should care in the first place. And here's how this works. And so, not making assumptions and making sure you understand where somebody's coming from can make all the difference. And especially if you're trying to bring people into an industry that's already tough enough as it is, then, helping somebody as much as you can is always the better choice there than just, making fun of somebody for not knowing something that you think that they should, because you should always just help people and we're all learning anyways. So, okay. Outlook. So I see it's paused a little bit. So basically the slide just says Outlook. I basically already touched on this, but before we were mostly focused on just running events, bringing new people into the industry, helping people level up their skills. But we're also now helping as well. Some organizations just don't know how to recruit cybersecurity people because some of the people that are writing, say, the job descriptions have no idea what the people who are actually supposed to be doing that job actually do. And so they'll just put a bunch of words and say, this is what we're looking for. And when they go to screen those people, they might be screening for completely different skill sets than what the job actually needs. And so we're helping kind of fill that gap to figure out and helping companies screen for specific skills, especially in cybersecurity, and then hopefully doing that in a fun way as well, so that anybody that's going through that process hopefully learns something along the way. And then, like I kind of mentioned before the four of us, the four co-founders, built all the content, we obviously cannot create infinite amounts of content in every single day. And so bringing on some of those challenge developers to help us out so that they're building content. And then they're also, reaching out to other people and their networks as well to bring more people in the industry. So that's part of our process as well, and just kind of generally expanding. And like I said, we brought Roman on as our first official full-time employee. So that was super exciting, especially because I think I didn't really go over this, but we have a pretty low operating costs. And so it's kind of different than some other organizations that need to bring in initial funding, specifically, for materials and stuff. And so because we had a low operating cost, we basically just paid for our domains and a PO box and a few other things. And so when we did these entrepreneurship competitions and stuff like that, and we were getting funding, a lot of that was actually to help us travel to different places to run these events, and then, paying for like a new router and different stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. But we're hopefully continuing to expand and help bring more people into the cybersecurity industry, kind of fine tune the cybersecurity education process. I know it's a little different. It's something that didn't really exist a few years ago. And so hopefully helping out there as well. All right. So that was a lot of different things that I talked about and pretty quick. So I will pause there. This is basically the end of it. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask, I guess, either in the chat or over voice. I don't know, whichever way works best. Rusty, I'll defer to you on that.
We're locked in a secret voice channel. Thank you, Mariah. We are currently locked in our secret voice channel. So if anyone has questions, please dump them in chat. While we wait for a few to roll in, I have a few that I wrote down that I'm curious about. What is the most challenging part about running MetaCTF, and why is it making challenges?
Okay, that's really funny. Could they hear your question too?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's really funny because it's entirely accurate and it hurts me. So there's new content all the time, and always new things popping up, but challenges take forever to write and they're a lot of work, but people enjoy them. But yeah, that is definitely the most challenging part. 100%.
Excellent. And what has been your favorite MetaCTF event so far?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, well, I'm going to give two because I won't pick one. So one of them was Wild West Hacking Fest, which Black Hills Information Security is a conference that they host in South Dakota twice a year now. And so back when it was in person, it was really awesome to go out there and drive through the mountains and then, work on all this cyber stuff like in the middle of nowhere. It was super awesome. And then the other one was our UVA in-person event, which was basically an event that we ran for students in the Mid-Atlantic region, and probably the biggest in-person event that we've ever run. I think it was 500 plus students and people, and we brought in a bunch of companies so that the students could recruit with them and then learn a bunch, and there was like lockpicking challenges and stuff, so it was a lot of fun. Nice.
All right, we got a couple questions from chat here. Kirk is asking, if you were to give past you advice on running MetaCTF, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. Figure out how to schedule your life better, I guess, just because there's so many different things going on, and especially since I started working full time, it's been a lot to like balance the two of them. And so I think figuring out who's going to work on what within the company and kind of setting that plan earlier on, just so that we actually had a more built out plan, I think, instead of doing a lot of it on the fly and kind of figuring out what we want to do.
Very reasonable. Ben is asking, he says, you've mentioned a mentor before that helped you through your pitch process. Who is this person and how did you all get in touch with them?
Question. Okay, so at UVA, there was this Pike Fellowship thing that we applied for. Basically, there was this family that wanted to give a company, like, I guess they wanted to sponsor a company to improve whatever. And so we were part of that process. And there was actually like a class that we took for a semester with somebody. And the person that taught that class, Damon, he actually teaches classes at UVA for entrepreneurship. And so through him, so he gave us a lot of advice. And then through him, he introduced us to other companies that he'd worked with in the past and other founders that he knew, and other founders in the Charlottesville area, because that's where UVA is. And so we met a lot of them through that.
Nice. Zach is asking, have you done any traditional go-to-market plans what's the strangest or most surprising, quote, business thing that you had to learn?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So it was funny because as we did this and as we talked to our advisors, they're like, this is how companies usually do things. Like they have this operating cost and they do things this way. But other industries are so different from the cybersecurity industry. Cybersecurity industry in itself is just a very unique place. And I think there's unique people. And I think that the marketing in the cybersecurity industry is very different than other organizations, especially since security people are a little bit more specific about, like emails that they're going to click on or people they're going to talk to. So very different, I think, than a lot of the advice that people gave us. But I think the most business thing was probably KPIs and like doing that. So key performance indicators of actually figuring out what metrics you wanted to hit for your company and how to hit those. And then the like total, I don't even remember them anymore because I've ignored them, but figuring out what the total market is for your organization and what percentage of it you're trying to reach with your organization.
Excellent. Katie Knowles says, how has it been starting and running a company alongside a full-time gig? P.S. She's a huge fan.
Oh, hey, Katie. It's so much work. It's a lot. It's not ideal. I think if I didn't care about Meta CTF so much and its success and like the people that it helps, I wouldn't do it. But I do love Meta CTF and I love the work that we do and I believe in it so much that I'm willing to suffer through some of those things to make it work. You're
doing God's work. Excellent. Last question is from Roy Havens asking, with the success of all the coding boot camps that are popping up, have you put any thought into that model?
Okay, cool. That's a good question. Coding boot camps. I'm actually not familiar with what that is.
I think that's like, where they you sit down for like 4 or 6 weeks and you like by the end you're fluent in Python or something. It's kind of the boot camps to get you ready for like a Bay Area job for the most part.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's a really great suggestion. It's something that we'll look into. I think we've thought of doing some sort of like package training type things where you work through different modules, which I think is kind of similar to that, but a little bit different. But yeah, that's a really good idea. And we'll definitely look into that. Thank you. Perfect.
Well, thank you so much. This is Mariah. She can be found on Twitter at @_MI5T_. And we'll be putting that up, I don't know, on socials or whatnot. Thank you once again, Mariah.
Thanks, Rusty.
Cool. We'll be taking a short break and then we'll be back with our panel with a few of the SPARSA board members. So stay tuned. Excellent, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. With me, I have the fabled Ben Kelly, Zachary Allen, and soon to be joining us, currently in a fight, I think, with someone cleaning his house, Kirk Pinto. So while we wait for Kirk to fight his Roomba, we will start off with some news to fill the time for a moment. I think the more interesting news for the week this week is the SolarWinds breach. So, Zach, Ben, what are your thoughts?
Who wants to go first on this one?
No, I'm interested in your take, Ben. Go ahead.
All right.
Let's do a quick round of intros too.
Yeah,
so
sure.
People think well, do these guys know what they're talking about?
The answer is no.
Fair. Yeah,
Absolutely
the answer is absolutely not. Yeah, I'm Ben Kelly. I'm one of the SPARSA board members, along with Zach and Rusty and Kirk and a slew of others, so you can see on our website. Director of Security for a fraud detection and account validation company. I think I got that right. Called Akata out here in Seattle. So we basically deal with a lot of data, and we try to keep that data safe. Before that, I did a bunch of government stuff for a long time. So this is my first foray into private industry and dealing with some of the fun that comes with these kind of breaches. So I'll say that this is an interesting one. Let me ask you two this: where does sophisticated APT fit into your threat model? Determined APT adversary.
I'm not going to lie to you. I don't really think about APTs. I'm more worried about the person leaving the unencrypted laptop in the not anymore, in the bin at TSA and then walking away, or getting a window blown out in Seattle somewhere. So that's my threat model these days. I mean, you've got to throw this back a decade ago, when someone stole the RSA root seed. I mean, that was the exact same thing. You had a supply chain targeted. I think it was a recruiting company or a marketing company, and they got compromised, and that's how the actor was able to leverage their way into the RSA, because RSA actually was reasonably secure. And I'm sure with the current breach, I mean, 400 of the top 500 Fortune 500 companies were using SolarWinds in some way, multiple government agencies. Yep. So, I mean, you don't have to break the chain. You just have to, find the weakest link in the chain, right? So, I'll kick it over to you, Zach. Thoughts, concerns?
Yeah. Well, it's been like an interesting few weeks because
you can introduce yourself there, Zach, or
sure. So my name's Zach Allen, director of threat intelligence at ZeroFox. We're basically a threat intelligence company, so we've been dealing a lot with the SolarWinds and the FireEye fallout on the board here with all these SPARSA board members as well. But basically, the tough thing about this, and I actually went and tried to look this up, and I had to find the blog post, but I wanted to look up how many actual APT-based supply chain attacks have occurred in the last 10 years. And I was pretty surprised that there was a good amount of them. Now, impact varied from like very small to something like SolarWinds, but I was talking with Ben about this today, and I saw someone put a really good take. They called it a hot take, but I didn't think it was that hot, where you have this sophisticated nation state actor. They set up this huge operation, a ton of logistics that goes into it, a ton of training, wargaming, like everything that goes into an operation. And then within 6 months, it gets burned and it becomes mainstream media news to the point where Trump and Biden and everyone's tweeting about it. It's bad, but I also think that they perhaps screwed up a little bit too, that they got caught so early. Because I would imagine this is like a 5-10 year mission, not like a 6-month smash and grab mission.
Yeah. So I think there's 2 important points there. I first want to go back to something Rusty said, where he said, I don't think about APTs. My threat model is somebody losing their laptop full of company information. Honestly, that's a reality I did not understand until I went out into a small company world and started doing security for somebody that's not a security company first. And the basics are so hard for some companies that when you start talking about nation state level resources, it's just in a category that you can't even waste your time considering, because you're still trying to convince people that 2FA is worthwhile, and that it, as annoying as it is to pull out your cell phone every time that you authenticate to Okta, there is a good reason why we make you do that. And shameless plug also, you should go read the SAML report about how they abuse SAML tokens if you haven't already, because that's kind of a scary side effect that a lot of people aren't talking about yet.
Was that the one where they were abusing the Duo? The Duo access key in order to generate responses based on which user account they had compromised.
Yeah, they can basically sign their own access tokens.
Yeah, that seems not concerning at all. Perfect.
Yeah, so it's kind of terrifying. So I mean, I don't know. I guess the takeaway for this is like, if you have a actor with enough determination and resources, they're going to find their way in. But to Zach's point, like, a 6-month turnaround on a nation state compromise is actually pretty impressive when you think about it. So if they are the alleged Russian actors, are probably having a really bad day right now, because they probably invested a lot of time and money and resources into this compromise that just went out the window. So
yeah, I guess on the tail end of this, the FireEye situation that happened as well. What are your guys' thoughts about them dumping the TTPs in GitHub for everyone to download in terms of being able to find their tools?
So good.
It was awesome.
That was fantastic.
I'm really glad they did that. Not just from like a, I think they call them NBIs, network-based indicator point of view, but just the YAR rules they threw out there almost immediately. People are throwing them on retro hunts for virus total. I think the list, the last time I checked it, was in the 700 or 800s at this point. So I think it's all good. Like, I think FireEye, and we were talking about this also earlier today, the egg on their face was in the beginning, but man, their stock is up right now. Like, I saw people tweeting like, oh my gosh, FireEye dropped $1. Like, of course they did. Like, and look at them now; they're almost $20.
They're
from like 13 to 20.
They're up 33% today. So big gains.
The question that not a lot of people are asking about the FireEye breach is, what was the real target? Because I find it very hard to believe that the internal red team tools of FireEye were the ultimate target of that breach. So you have a company that deals with governments worldwide, has incredible sensitive access to all kinds of scary places. So you can't, I don't believe for a second that the red team tools were the final target of that attack. Now, it's definitely a really hilarious slap in the face to the people that stole them to just like dump all your signatures and burn all your tools on GitHub. But I don't know. I feel like there's some collateral damage there that isn't being talked about right now.
I agree. But excellent. We have acquired one Kirk Pinto. So let's dive in. I'll ask you guys some questions. You can respond. If you don't feel like answering a question, go ahead and punt it, and we'll go from there. So, Kirk, I'll ask you the first one, give you an opportunity to introduce yourself as well. First being, how are you preventing burnout in 2020, not only for you, but for your team?
Oh, God. Hi, I'm Kirk. I work at a small live streaming company called Twitch.tv. I manage the security incident response team. I feel like I get a cop out here. My team is extremely new. But burnout seems to be happening in COVID extremely quickly. And what you really, really, really have to do is check in on people and like do the human thing. Like, are you doing okay? Is your workload okay? And sort of reassure anyone that like, reassure people that their performance is okay. Reassure that there are no surprises at the end of the year, like performance reviews come around. But like, all in all, like, keep being human, like keep talking to people, keep regular one-on-ones. I have a book called Managing Humans, which was written by somebody who worked at or managed people at Palantir, which I used to be at. It's pretty good. It's all about like managing the interaction between yourself, an engineer, high performers, low performers, etc. But it helps you find like nuggets of feedback that you can hone in on. And I think like practicing that week over week helps a lot. But no one's perfect. I welcome feedback, but that's another thing. Like, just keep asking for feedback.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed the when COVID started in March or April, when everything started locking down. I've worked from home for a long time, so this is not very different for me. But I noticed the amount of energy I had. Went from an 8 or 9 hour workday to like a 7 hour workday to a 6 hour workday, and trying to find ways to escape kind of the four walls here. thankfully I live in the middle of nowhere, so I have 4 large walls. Some of the folks that I know and that I work with are in larger cities, and so their 4 walls are maybe 800 or 900 square feet. So the struggle is definitely real. Kick it over to you, Zach. Your thoughts for yourself and your team.
Sure. Yeah. So it's an interesting situation for me because I have 8 people that are in my department. 5 are in India, 1 is in the UK, and 1 is in the US. So it's always been tough just doing the remote thing for myself personally. Like before I worked at my current company, I worked out of a startup in San Francisco, and I was full remote, just like Rusty. Actually, Rusty and I worked together there. And I've always been like very much, I needed human interaction when I talk to people. And I needed that change of scenery as well, where I can leave wherever I live, go to some place to work, and then come back and then have like my home at the time be my sanctuary. So at least for myself, I think routine is a pretty important thing for me because that's just kind of how I grew up with I actually had lack of routine. It wasn't until I started putting routine in my life until I could actually feel that it was useful. But being able to get up and get out, walk the dog, shower, put on work clothes, don't put on pajamas or things like that, put the coffee on. Sometimes, and some days, I'm like wearing my shoes down to my office just so I can just have some similar kind of concept of work. For my team, I've definitely moved to a lot more frequent video chats, one-on-ones, and things like that. Conversation, providing feedback where I can, as well as recognition. I think right now, especially people in the security industry, whether it's COVID and then SolarWinds on top of that, we're just burnt out from all the crap that we have to deal with from a day to day. So to kind of go out of your way and publicly recognize somebody on your team or in your company for doing something well, that really goes a long way because it at least shows that like something good is happening right now. So that's basically how I've been handling it. So
I think it's really interesting that you said call out the positive things. I think like as an industry, we do a really bad job of like, hey, you did a good job with X, hey, you did a good job with Y, and a really, really good job of jumping down companies and people's throats when they fuck up. So like rewarding good behavior is a huge win.
Yeah, one of the gentlemen that Kirk and I used to work with, Jeff Belknap, who is the CSO at Slack and the CSO over at LinkedIn now. Kirk, can you mute yourself? He when Slack had a small breach a couple years ago, I think they lost some encrypted passwords and stuff. It seems like everyone always does. One of the responses he had, he's like, today me, tomorrow you, essentially, when a bunch of other folks were kind of jumping down his throat about like, how irresponsible he was, etc. So I'll round out this question with you, the burnout question. Ben, I know you're kind of a team of 2 here, so it's a little bit of a different perspective. So give us your take on there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo the same things that Kirk and Zach said. It's all about communication with your team. Trying to keep dialogue as open as possible. It's really isolating working from home. So unlike, I think, everyone on this call, I had never worked from home before COVID started. That was a totally new world for me. So the lack of face-to-face interaction was a weird thing to get used to for sure. Definitely echo the comments about praising people when they do well, because I think that happens much more naturally when you interact with people face-to-face. It's easy to have a casual conversation like, oh yeah, that was awesome, like that thing that you did. But that's not always something we go out of our way to say when we're in structured meetings. So taking time to actually like recognize good work, I think, is very valuable. The other thing I would say on a personal level is find some hobbies that aren't involving staring at a screen. And this is something for me, at least personally, is that I find that my burnout was really bad because my home became my workplace. So then it was just very easy to just continuously work because there was no boundaries anymore. And then even my hobbies would be like, oh, I want to code this thing, or oh, I want to do this CTF or whatever. And at a certain point, I just kind of had to take a step back and be like, you know what? I'm going to go read a book, or I'm going to go watch TV, or I'm going to go do something that's not like staring at my laptop for endless hours a day. And I think at a certain point, for the sake of your sanity, you need to do something that takes you away from the keyboard. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a former boss who used to always tell me, leave some water in the well each day when you leave work. And I've actually used those exact words for my team, because some of them are like checking in code at 9 p.m. or sending me Slack messages and like, what are you doing? Like, I'm going to yell at you for working. So
that's a good point too. Be conscious of the fact that like, just because you're working off hours doesn't mean everybody is. So when you're slacking people at 11 o'clock at night, that sort of, even if you don't mean to, introduces a pressure of like, oh, my boss is working right now, or oh, my peer is working right now. Like, should I be doing something? So just, even if you're working off hours, just be careful with communication.
The other interesting thing that I have found gets lost with sort of the remote COVID quarantine situation that we currently have is those hallway conversations where you walk by someone and you say, oh, I just have a quick question for you, or like, hey, I was wondering about this thing. Being a remote person for so long, and I know Zach experienced this as well, you really have to over-index on the communication there. So kind of where has that challenge been for you, both personally and kind of within, you know, a team, to kind of build those additional paths of communication where, you know, there's a certain barrier to entry. It's like, I don't want to bug him for something stupid. Like, I don't want to Slack him or email someone. But how have you encouraged those additional paths of communication so that people can continue to have those hallway conversations? I'll start off with Ben, because he got the short end of the stick there.
Let's do it.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that, because I think it's something I've been struggling with a lot, because a lot of things that were probably a hallway discussion before, or like a brief 5 minutes swing by somebody's desk and discuss it, have now turned into a 30-minute meeting. So I don't know that I've done the best job of balancing this. I don't know if the people I work with have done the best job of balancing this. I think some of it is the natural, you know, the communicating over Slack or your chat app of choice is always going to lose a little bit of nuance to the discussion. So people want to have face-to-face discussions as much as they can, but that also means that your calendar fills quickly with blocks of time that you're, you know, sitting in Zoom meetings. So I hate to punt on it, but I'm not sure I have a good solution, honestly.
No, and that's fair. I think that's the challenge that you and me and many others have been facing here. So Zach Kirk, do you have a solution for us?
I don't have a good solution.
Yeah, it's basically it may not be the best solution. It's probably okay, and I think Ben would appreciate this working in corporate security, because it's very dangerous if you have a sales team. What you could do, and what we've done, at least at Zero Fox, that's had actually pretty good success, is have office hours. So basically, you're running a security team, or at least in my end, I run a threat intelligence team that does like RFIs and like random one-off work, and sometimes you're running for sales support. You just put like 1 hour during lunch with you and a few people from your team, like kind of stakeholders, and then you can say, hey, we're just going to hang out here and eat. We're going to talk about security. We're going to talk about projects. If you have a question regarding the team or some like sales opportunity, that's generally worked out pretty well. The double-edged sword portion of this is that then a salesperson or somebody who, you know, is maybe not in security, if you kind of deal with that, can kind of come on and really pepper you with like work stuff. And it's not really a coffee or water cooler conversation. It's more of just like a, hey, we have a meeting. So
yeah, one of the things that I've actually found to be very successful is sort of like take a half hour, play a game with the team. It could be Jackbox. It could be, you know, you probably don't have a team of Counter-Strikers, but you could be Counter-Strike, could be like a League of Legends game. I've found that is very effective to kind of get people to lower their barriers and kind of open up, and you can just sort of chat. And maybe you talk about work, maybe you don't, but I feel like that really opens up the paths of communication to everyone. It's not so serious all the time. So, you know, if you're dunking on someone because they suck at drawing on Jackbox, you know, there it is. Cool. So, actually interesting question from the chat from Timur. He is asking, what positives come from the new work from home situation at all? Or are there any decent takeaways? I'll kind of prime this question with an answer. I have found that there has been a lot more power, sort of on the pendulum swung back to the worker. People are, you know, you're no longer being forced to move to specific locations for work. People are being flexible. You have a lot of banking, a lot of industries that never would have been able to go remote. Banking, finance, even some of the government work, are figuring out how to make it work because you have to. And folks who, you know, maybe didn't want to move away from their family in the East Coast to go to the Bay Area, now don't have to anymore. Additionally, I think people who don't work remote and now are being forced to are understanding the challenges of a globally distributed company, maybe when you're not in the headquarters, and how much harder it is to stay connected when you're not in the office every day. So I'll start with you, Zach. Kind of your thoughts on the challenges we're facing now, and kind of, you know, what potentially long-term successes might come out of this whole COVID quarantine.
Yeah. I definitely agree with your sentiments here, Rusty. I think that, you know, I came from a company that was very strictly, you know, it's kind of like an East Coast startup thing. It's mostly a government thing, and it's a lot like of that exists on the East Coast. Is like show up to work, go into the office, be in here by this time, and people kind of sort of look at you funny if you leave like a little bit early for one day, or it's just kind of messy, right? It doesn't really fit in with like the startup or like the tech company style of like work habits. So I think a lot of these companies, including the US government of all, you know, organizations, are just like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. So for those that are fortunate enough to be in careers that aren't affected by COVID in the sense of they didn't lose their job or get laid off, a lot of these companies are going to get more creative in terms of like, oh, so I don't have to spend this much for a software engineer in the Bay Area when I can hire somebody at a lot lower price, but it has a like really good standard of living in Iowa or in Texas or in North Carolina. And so I'm excited to see a little bit more of that, because it's that flexibility that I think really matters. And really the second, at least for myself, and I'll pose this as like a sub question here, it's really hard to do 8 hours of like continuous work every single day for 40 hours a week and for like
Absolutely.
years, right? So in terms of time management, you kind of put things down of like, this is my time for meetings, this is my time for coding or doing work or things like that. But also you can kind of just get some of that time back, where instead of just going to that coffee machine and kind of screwing around a little bit or going out to lunch for a little bit too long, you can get some laundry done. You can go do some chores or some errands and things like that. So like my home quality of life is a little bit better.
Well, let's be perfectly clear. Anyone who actually claims to do 40 hours of work in a week is full of shit. Because every time that I would go to the office, I would get maybe 6 or 8 hours of work done for the week, because people always wanted to have conversations or meetings, lunch, coffee, walks, one-on-ones, whatever it happens to be. So like in terms of actual work, when I'm at my desk working remote, I get infinitely more done because there's only asymmetrical communication to me. So Zach, your thoughts? Or Zach, I already talked to you. Ben, your thoughts?
Yes.
So on a more technical level, I think it's forcing conversations about security that a lot of companies weren't prepared to have before. So congratulations, you now have a mostly remote workforce. How are you going to handle identity management? How are you going to handle device identification? How are you going to handle, you know, authentication to your data center that is sitting in a closet somewhere in one of your offices? So I think there's a lot of, you know, I hate the term zero trust, and I think it's something that gets abused really bad in the industry for marketing reasons. But for lack of a better term, like there's a lot of zero trust type conversations the companies are being forced to have now about how do we mature beyond this kind of hardened outer perimeter, and actually make our mobile workforce safe and able to do their job. So I think that's one interesting side effect. I won't say it's being handled well everywhere. I mean, go look at Shodan for all the 3389s that are facing the internet right now. You know, people are just asking to have a bad time to ransomware. But I mean, I think for companies that are actually embracing it, you know, it's a good time to get a lot of sort of progressive security work done. and besides that, I would kind of echo what's already been said. Like, it's opening the talent aperture up for companies, so you can look all over the world, frankly, if you're willing to. You can look all over the United States. You can look, wherever the right person for the job is, rather than the right person who will move to Seattle, Washington, and pay a ridiculous amount of money to live in this city. So
absolutely. And Kirk, I'll move it over to you with sort of a sub question. With everyone going remote, companies have had to find a way to support this remote workforce. The VPN that you had that normally supported 50 people remote now has to support 1,500. So maybe you don't go full tunnel anymore. How do you augment that with additional security tooling to, make sure that your endpoints and your workforce is secure? So if you can dive into it all, what have you guys done to augment the fact that you don't have this centralized network platform to do all your incident response and logging and metrics off now that everyone's sort of spread to the wind?
Sure. So let's deconstruct that a little bit. You figure we used to get a lot of visibility from office sensors, network taps, etc., that are now sitting in an office where no one is. So that's like the core, the crux of the issue. The answer is, when you have to augment the VPN to support the users, you augment them and think about security later. We're still a company. We still have to make money. And then we have to build in controls quickly behind our systems team that is augmenting our VPNs to support more people. What that looks like is there's a lot of people touching production data and you have not as much visibility as you would have liked. So you fall back to compensating controls. Where can you implement two-factor? Where can you force certificate verification? The threat model in general ends up being a lot more secure because you go back to that, I'm going to use that awful term, zero trust, and you rely more on the identity of the workstation, the identity of the employee to access customer data. But also, to parrot what Haim said, most modern orgs don't use VPNs. We're sort of moving towards a Beyond Corp model, which helped. We're sort of halfway there. Some people use VPN, some people don't. The people that don't use VPN, we have much better logs for them than we do for the people that do. And we have to work to sort of lower or close the gap between the two.
Totally reasonable. What I've found as sort of a theme is there has been a pretty high priority on getting the business moving. So whatever you have to do to make the VPN work, and then you follow it up, hopefully, with building around the additional security controls there. Also, welcome to the stream, Kirk. Cool. We'll pivot over a little bit. I think Ben actually wrote this question down for us, for the three of you. As you transitioned from an IC role into a leadership role, how'd that transition go? Would you do anything different now that you've kind of been through that? So, Kirk, you can start if you
want. No, I wouldn't have done anything different, but I definitely miss being an IC. There's this autopilot feature in the back of my brain. Like, I could be an IC with basically no effort. I could do my work. I could probably crush it. Moving into management is a lot harder. You have to build new neural pathways. You have to build new relationships. You have to work to do things you didn't have to do before. But I love it. I love having strategic control over what I want to do. And it seems like when I was progressing through security, I thought I could do that as an IC. I thought I could influence the way people thought about the program. And to some extent I could, but not to the extent that I wanted. Taking a leadership role definitely helps reorient some people around my style of thinking. But it also allows them to just shoot down my really bad ideas. So it's a take and pull. I like it. I wouldn't do anything I wouldn't do it any other way.
And Brandon chimes in here and says you need to care about other people's problems as well. So true.
I mean, that's absolutely true.
That's true. I don't mind that. I love doing that.
Yeah,
that's why we have this organization, because we care about other people. Darn.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. My first job out of college, I had the worst manager. I think and we've all had this conversation.
Are we allowed to dox?
We're not doxing, but thinking back at it, I think this was the person's first like leadership role, and like they were just used to kind of being that technical person, and then they move into management, and then they're like, wait a minute, being Mr. or Mrs. Right is not necessarily the best approach to being a people leader. And I felt like I was 21, 22, and oh my gosh, it was just every single day I dreaded it, and I was so happy when I was gone. And I look back and I'm thankful I had that experience, because being in management now, and having teams from different cultures, different countries, and things like that, it has shown me a little bit of perspective just in terms of like how much you can help a person's day out as like a leader or a manager just by like having a conversation with them, or just kind of working with them as they go through life troubles or something like that. That was the thing I was not prepared for management, but I'm super happy I'm going through it right now. It's tough, but you're not just leading a team of security engineers, you're leading a team of people. And people have bad days, people have bad weeks. Bad stuff happens to good people, and good stuff happens and all that stuff. So, I mean, I'm really glad I'm going through it now. And in terms of telling like an older self of like what I would do like differently, it would probably just be, and this is probably trite to say, like just be really patient and let people talk more than you, because a lot of the times people just need to vent, and instead of trying to fix everything with that hacker mindset or break everything with that hacker mindset, sometimes just letting someone talk and speak through things and work through it is all they really need.
I think a big problem I had, especially like leaving college, when we were competitive with each other and then like competitive to get a job, was like winning conversations, like going in with the well actuallys, like you're wrong. And like training all of that out and like just wait. People are allowed to be wrong. It's fine. Sometimes like you have people that learn the most when they are incorrect and they have to like learn from a crisis. So like why rob them of that? Or why even like maybe they're not wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. I
was going to say one of the interesting things too when you start taking leadership roles is that your viewpoint on the issue is not always the most important one.
Right.
So especially when you're in a non-security org, you A, cost the business money, and B, are not the product that they are trying to sell at the end of the day. So there's times when you will lose a discussion just for the sake of the fact that it's not a good business decision, regardless of how good of a security decision it is. Yeah. So that's something you kind of have to prepare for. But I think so I had a mentor in my last job who kind of explained leadership to me by saying that to a certain extent, you're a shit umbrella for the people under you. And that's always kind of stuck in my head, that like your job is to keep as much of the not waste of time, but the things that are not worth the people under you's time off their plate as possible, to enable them to do their job better, and then elevate the successes they have to everyone else in the organization. So the higher you get in leadership, the more that you're taking the blame and passing off the success to somebody else. Yep. And that's something that you really need to be prepared for.
Well, there's a reason CEOs get paid so much. I have found one of the tools to success I've had in talking to folks is sort of setting the rules there and say, do you just need me to be a sounding board? Do you just need someone to vent to, or do you actually want advice? And if you go in the conversation and they just they're just having a bad day and they just want to unload into someone, and you're just sitting there listening, that is often more helpful for people to just kind of have a safe place, a comfortable place for them to be able to confide. And maybe they don't want advice. So that if I walk in there and someone's starting to unload on me and I just ask like, do you want advice, or do you just want someone to bitch to? I find that frames the conversation really nicely, because more often than not, they're just like,
my favorite rapper DMX, some people don't want to get happy, they just want to get mad.
So actually, one thing I want to say on that is, if you're in a leadership position, never complain down. And this is a huge pet peeve of mine with new leaders, is people who will be upset about something in the organization and they will bitch to their subordinates about how unhappy they are with the decision.
Oh, gosh.
And that's a very bad look for a lot of reasons. And no matter how frustrated you are, you never bitch down. Always save that for somebody at your level or above your level.
I'd say bitch down,
or way to do it for sure, but don't like.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And also don't talk shit about other leaders to subordinates.
Gosh. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no,
Oh
yeah.
man.
Yeah.
No matter what your personal feelings are on it, like never
It's
ever.
it's a certain
Yeah,
unified
it's a slippery
front.
slope.
Yeah, and I mean, like I take a lot of. I originally started reading like military leadership, and then I went to business leadership. But it's always the same, just in terms of like, imagine it. You're in a battle or something like that. Let's just say, and you have troops, and you got to move them a certain way around. Like, if you degrade like other leaders' decisions, imagine what that person kind of being in the foxhole next to you is going to try to be like a good teammate or a good follower with you.
Yep.
So it's really important that, and I've had to bite my tongue a lot, and I'm sure everyone here has.
Oh
And
yeah.
I would imagine within like a few years of anybody in security starting, they'll learning when to kind of say what's on your mind in the right spot is like a very interesting, hard thing to do. But almost always when it comes to management and like senior leadership and things like that, you can't, it's got to look like one thing. And if it's not one thing, then people get really, really upset.
Yep.
And
Learning when to table conversations, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
Pretty key.
Cool. All right, we'll move on a little bit. A nice easy one here. How do you recommend folks get more involved in the security industry?
Don't. Do you want to? Honestly, is the first question. Like, do you actually want to get more involved? And then the second thing is sort of a cop out, but like, get a mentor. Get somebody that you can ask a lot of questions to. A lot of questions about, like, not even about infosec, like progression, life. Am I getting paid the right amount? I don't understand my salary. I don't know how to negotiate when someone talks to me. Like, really, really basic stuff. And then from there, go to what would you like to do in infosec?
Mm-hmm.
I find myself having this conversation a lot where you have the conversation like somebody has gotten the job they wanted and you're like, okay, but what do you want to do here? Infosec is a huge field. It's like IT, right? Helping people specialize, asking the right questions, providing avenues for people is what a good mentor should do, from free to paid, right? I am lucky enough that one of my first bosses from a prior company just accepts all of the garbage that I throw at him.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a V-CISO at Coalfire now, I think. But he just listens to me bitch about everything, and then ultimately like help me make this decision. Like, I do actually want to be a leader. I do want to do this. I do want to do infosec strategy. I want to help organizations slowly ablate risk and remove threat surfaces. That's what's fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation took 5 years, right? But having somebody that can have that conversation with you helps a lot.
Yeah, and really, it can honestly come down to when you're looking for mentors, just asking, and that's probably like the hardest thing. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. The best thing that can happen, they can say is yes. So, like, I have a few mentors at this point in my career, and some of them are old bosses. One of them is my current boss, and every single time it's just been like, "Hey, I'm looking for someone to bounce ideas off of. Do you have time to jump on Zoom? Can I send you an email? And like, can I just be absolutely just unfiltered, because I'm just trying to work these things that are in my head down into a medium to try to get somebody else to understand." And then just follow up with like, am I crazy? Am I not crazy? Am I in the right direction? Learning a mentor is really just somebody who's been through a bunch more failures than you have, and they also kind of apply it with the lens of their personal experience with you, and that having someone like that on standby is really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
To answer the how would you find one, sorry to cut you off real fast,
No, you're good.
is start in your organization that you're in right now. Find people that have opinions that are similar to yours, and then slowly graduate to like the people with crazy pie in the sky opinions that just seem wrong. But at the end of the day, it's just someone you can talk to and ask questions about that can provide insight. Sorry, Ben, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I guess what I would say too is don't always think about it like a super rigid, like you are my declared mentor and I am the declared mentee. Like there's a lot of peer mentorship that happens in this industry, and the more that you get to know people, like everyone in this chat right now, we constantly talk to each other about, this thing happened at work, or I have this offer standing from a job or whatever, just to get people's input on it. Because the more that you tap your community, the more opinions you have at your disposal. So I would say, shameless plug for Sparsa, like, don't be afraid to drop a line in the general chat if you don't feel like you have somebody that you can talk to about something and you have a lingering question. There's a lot of us who'd be happy to chat with you. So besides that, I guess the only other advice I would give for getting into the InfoSec world is ignore Twitter, for the love of God.
Holy shit.
We were talking about this, I think, last night, about how toxic InfoSec Twitter is, and it makes our industry look really bad. Because there's a lot of clickiness, a lot of inside jokes, and a lot of just like people who hate each other for something that happened 10 years ago at a conference, and it just doesn't matter anymore. So by and large, like, there's a couple of people on Twitter that you can follow that are doing really good work and putting it out there, like Mubix, but there's a lot of others who it's just not, don't dwell on that stuff. So
it's the voice of the vocal minority for the most part, I find. So
for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We got a couple more here. I'll scroll through chat while we answer this next question, see if there's anything interesting.
I would like say meta is like find your cool kids club, pitch for Sparsa that you are comfortable with.
Sparsa.org.
Sparsa.org.
Cool. Kind of this actually dovetails very nicely into this, related to our conversation last night. What is your favorite and least favorite part about the security industry in general?
I'll start. So Kurt kind of touched on this when he was talking about how security leadership is a lot of like having to do the best you can with what you've got. I like that security kind of feels like you're playing a strategy game. I like strategy games a lot. I've spent a lot of my childhood playing them. So I kind of like that idea of you have a finite amount of resources and you have an unsurmountable challenge, and your job is to do the best you can with the resources you've got. That's what makes security fun for me. It's this constant puzzle that you're always fighting against. It's always changing. It's probably the most dynamic discipline of computer science, if I had to guess. So it's just, I think the fact that it, in three, like, no one could have guessed the SolarWinds breach was going to happen in August. So you've completely changed everyone's threat models. People are talking about supply chain again. People are talking about, pivoting between organizations. Like, there was the bit about how Microsoft could have been an enabling vector for some of these companies. So, we've all of a sudden have to change our mindsets completely when it comes to third-party risk management paradigms. So, yeah, I like the dynamic nature of it a lot. Least favorite, I mean, besides InfoSec Twitter,
it can be InfoSec Twitter.
I don't know. I think in a funny sort of way, security is a huge discipline. So one of the tough parts about it is it's hard to get depth in a particular area unless you want to dedicate your career to it. So, you kind of have to make a decision at a certain point. Like, are you going to be somebody who is an expert in reverse engineering x86 binaries, or are you going to have a little bit of depth in a lot of things, but not necessarily be able to just like, spit out, assembly commands off the top of your head. So I don't know. I think that is tough sometimes, that you can't have both breadth and depth in the security field.
Agree. Kirk?
I guess I'll start with the best. I agree with the puzzle, but sort of from a different aspect. I feel like it was a puzzle that no one asked me to solve, and people get mad when you solve it. And like, I love everything about that, right? I love having conversations with people that are like, but why would someone do that? And you're like, no, you're thinking wrong. Welcome to the internet. I think we are sort of at, like, it's really weird that like we're still here, but we're at this point where we learned this in college while people were simultaneously learning software engineering, computer science, etc. But they didn't maybe internalize things that, like, people will use the things you make for bad things, or for malice.
Mhm.
And being that educating force, or maybe even showing them some way, shape, or form, and like proving it over and over again. That part is fun. I love that part of the puzzle. That's why I do instant response. I love seeing what attackers did. Like, I was telling someone yesterday, like, dude, the SolarWinds breach is super exciting because, like, it's we're talking about supply chain again. It was really bad. It's really fucking awesome. And I get amped about things like that while everyone else is like, no, it's scary. I would say, like, the thing I don't like about it is I think security has gotten to a point where it is very popular, and you have sort of the armchair InfoSec employees, personalities, etc., that sort of kind of know it, or they know enough about it, and then they'll assert something that like may be right, may be wrong, or maybe just helps their product or cause. I don't really like that. I don't like vendor soup, and I don't like InfoSec Twitter. That's me. Also, hi Zach, I love you.
Thanks, Kirk. So for me, to kind of dovetail a little bit on Kirk, I'll start with what I don't like first. I think with those personalities of people that like, armchair quarterbacks or armchair type of security people that are on Twitter or even at like organizations, it's kind of weird, right? When you kind of start in the security world, people look to you for like the right answers. And with that, like, it's almost like Spider-Man, right? Great power comes great responsibility. That goes to people's heads. And then the one thing that drives me nuts, because I used to do this, but it wasn't until that really shitty first job until I stopped doing it, is I guess a modern term for it is gatekeeping, where people will know the right answer to something and they'll like forcibly keep people out so they can be the only ones with that knowledge. And that's one of the reasons why, I went to SPARSA, is because there are all these people that know way more than I do, and they're willing to just like let the floodgates open and just like dump everything that they have on you for you to kind of sort out and figure out. But I think those that kind of do that gatekeeping, and you see it on security Twitter, you see it, I've seen it at work, I've seen it at conferences. It's just like, what does it do? Like, okay, you kept somebody out from the security community from learning something. Like, did that help solve anything? Like, it's very, very selfish.
Yeah, it doesn't make it better. It doesn't make it better overall.
No, it doesn't. In terms of like my favorite part of security, at least in this industry, it's kind of funny, and I might like pick on Kirk here for saying like the vendor pitches and things like that. I work at a vendor. There is something really awesome when that amalgamation of finding the right thing to work on, finding that right problem and helping that one customer, it's like a really good feeling. And that customer doesn't have to be somebody you're selling something to. It could be an internal customer, like you upgraded the VPN or you enabled something like on an endpoint that made usability a lot easier or somebody more secure. It's that feeling right afterwards that you get of like, oh, I just contributed something into this mass like universe of all these things that could happen. Like something good has come out of it. And I still love that to this day. And probably when that goes away is when I'll either like retire or get out of security. So
yeah, same, big same. Cool. All right, we probably got one more here. This was a question from Katie. There was a good question on mentors during Mariah's talk, kind of turning that to the panel here. How have the mentors you reached out to as an IC changed since shifting towards management? And then sort of how have you taken on a role of a mentor to the wet behind the ear, fresh out of college, ICs in your industry?
Ooh, man.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. I got to think about
Good
that.
Question,
a little bit. Yeah, that is a great question.
So I guess what I would start by saying is, I guess I'll answer the second question first. Is the most important thing to remember is mentorship's always worth your time, because so in my last job, somebody used to say that if you ever want to move on from your job someday, you need to train somebody to be as good as you are or better, unless you plan on staying exactly where you are forever. So if you don't have a vested interest or like that real investment in training the next generation, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice in a way. So mentorship's absolutely always worth your time, and you should be dedicating to it. I think as far as how to mentor people, it's hard because it totally depends on the individual that you're dealing with and what their strengths and weaknesses are. But the best thing you can do is kind of sit back and listen, and internalize like what you would do in a given situation, and then help them get there on the decision. Don't tell them what the right thing to do is. What was the first part of the question again? It was
as you transitioned into a leadership role, how has your mentee changed?
Yeah, so I think as you move out of an IC role into a management role, you need to start looking for mentors who aren't in the security industry. You need to start finding people who understand business. You need to start finding people who understand the tangential organizations to what you do, because leadership is very much about spheres of influence and understanding how to speak other people's languages, and how to work cooperatively with people who don't know what you do and explain to them what you do at a level that they can digest. So you definitely need to, once you start stepping away from that IC role into that leadership role, you need to start thinking about like, what other parts of the organization do I need to understand in order to do this effectively?
So that's a really good point, because you have to build a line. Like going back to what Zach said, I think it was Zach, or I don't remember. Like your product isn't InfoSec. You're not being more secure doesn't make you more money usually. Being less secure might lose you money. So it's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't. But building partnerships across organizations is huge.
Yep.
I will go next into the mentorship space. I completely agree that mentorship is always worth your time. And I think the way you get better at it is by doing it more, which is awful to say. But the big thing, and you sort of touched on it, was being available. But what I tried to do is like, please explain more of the situation to me, until like you can't explain anymore. And then you sort of ask questions like, what options are available to you? What can you do? What metrics do you have? This is a thing that I have tried. It works, but here's the caveats. And like being brutally honest with someone about like where you have succeeded and where you have failed. And like sort of helping people learn from your failures, I think is extremely important. That's big for like when I was an IC and I was looking around, because like I didn't know if I wanted to be the person that wanted to reverse engineer x86 binaries forever. I didn't know if I wanted to be an AppSec engineer. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And eventually I made an incident response. When you move to leadership, Zach and I actually talked about this a lot, and Zach was the one that pulled the trigger. I found myself a lot more interested in the business side. I'm a lot more interested in the money, how the money works, how I get paid, and how we can like enable, like, how can my organization help that go up and to the right? Yeah.
Awesome. These are really good. Yeah. And to kind of tag on in terms of being a mentor, it does take some time in going through good experiences. And I think for me, mentorships, or being a mentor and having them, I rely on both. So be as candid as you want about your bad experiences, because I think humans, we learn from failure more than anything. So it's kind of a cheat code when you can provide somebody your failures and say, like, here's what I did, like, given the situation that you're in, take, the data that I've collected and then kind of make your decision from that. Because there's this common thing when it's actually in poker, it's called resulting. And really the basic premise behind it is your true positive, true negative, false positive, false negative. I made a good decision, I got bad luck. I made a bad decision, I got good luck, and then everything in between. So having all that information available is really just kind of like that core thing that you look for in mentors. And then as you progress through your career and you do that for somebody else, it's also helpful for you to reflect on those good and bad kind of experiences that you had as well. In terms of how it shifted, so a lot of, when I first got into leadership and management, like my boss at the time was moving into executive leadership and management, which is a whole other ballgame and types of personalities. So a lot of my interests have really revolved into executive leadership and business and things like that. And so finding people that have nothing to do with security, like Kirk said, like the finance, like CFO, someone on the sales side, somebody who just lives and breathes customer support and customer success. Because we think that IT and security have had some bad tickets. There's nothing compared to customer success and customer support. Those people are the most resilient people I've ever met. Oh my gosh. So there's even stuff to learn from there, right? So,
Hey, thanks to your local customer service rep.
Yeah, seriously. You think you've taken beatings in security?
SPARSA 7's in chat, please. SPARSA 7's in chat.
Yeah, so as you kind of progress, like, find those different tiers, find those peer mentors like Kirk was talking about. We all do this. Anybody on the SPARSA Discord, on Twitter, reach out to me. I'm happy to just brain dump anything on the subject, and just kind of pick and choose, get a handful. I always think in threes because I used to work for the military, and the military can't count past three. So they always have like these things where, leadership for management or combat stuff, it's always in threes. So find 3 mentors, find a peer, find a few that are a little bit upper in management or in your org chart, and just start asking questions.
Excellent.
I
Yeah.
think a lot of it also starts with like vulnerability. Like, you have to learn not to be afraid, and it's really fucking scary at the beginning.
Be humble.
Yeah. On the other side of that is when someone does open up to you, you need to not be an asshole. So
Absolutely.
be a good citizen.
Accommodating.
One of the tenets I try to follow is I try to be the dumbest person in the room, because if I'm the dumbest person in the room, that means the only thing I'm able to do is learn from everybody else. And as soon as I realized that I was the big fish in the pond, I went to go find other ponds to go play on. So yeah, that's always served me well. Cool. I think with that, we'll probably wrap it up for the evening. So I do want to thank Zach and Kirk and Ben for tolerating me for an hour while I beat them with questions, and a huge thank you to Mariah for putting together a talk for us before this. So please go follow her on Twitter _MI5T_ and the Meta CTF Twitter as well. And please follow us here on Twitch as well as YouTube and our other socials on Facebook and Twitter as well. Seriously, thank you everyone for making this a success. And with that, I think we'll sign off for the evening. So
Do you want to mention the marathon stream next week?
Oh yes, I do. Okay, next week is going to be so good. On Wednesday, I think that's the 23rd, right?
Yeah, the 23rd.
We'll post something on socials of exactly what time this starts, but it'll probably be early afternoon Eastern time. We are all going to sit and live stream the whole advent of code.
But
The wrinkle is, or the cyber of code. The wrinkle is we're going to do this in a language we don't know. So it's probably going to be something like Elixir or fucking Golang. I don't even know what it's going to be. It's going to be a complete shit show. And we're Rust. We're getting a lot of Rust votes over here. So please join us. We'll post something on socials next week. Please come hang out. It's going to be an open stream for everybody, so you can jump in and stream and share your screen, and we're all just going to be
in Discord. We'll jump some guests in too, who if they want to share in our pain.
So. It's going to be good. You can code in Python 2.7. It's only been end of life for 18 months. It's fine. Everything's good. So seriously, thank you everyone for hanging out with us and making this a success. So follow all the socials, subscribe to all the things, follow all the channels. We will see you Wednesday for a happy holiday stream. Until then,
Too scratched. Oh god.
Have a good night.